Hello, everyone. My name is Drew Dosek, and welcome to Trading the Close. Today, the markets experienced a great rally, and it was on the back of news of a deal being made with tariffs with the UK. Now, this is a step in the right direction. It is not the biggest of deals that was claimed earlier by our president. However, this is a step in the right direction for deals being done. Investors are happy and rejoicing by buying stocks. Now, keep in mind, our top three trading partners here in the United States are Canada, Mexico, and then China, with China being the largest one with the trade deficit. So, a deal being struck with one of those three countries would likely push the markets much, much higher. But at least we're making steps in the right direction now. And investors, as I've said, are just piling into the market as we speak. So let's jump into the chart so we can see what data is presenting itself today. First up, we've got the heat map, as you see here on the left-hand side of the screen. We've got the Dow Jones now up 0.76%, NASDAQ up 1.68%. S&P 500 up 0.73%. U.S. oil had a nice spike today too, up 3.59%. Gold is falling down. That makes sense. Risk on in stocks, risk off in gold. And so folks are starting to get out of gold, and we'll look at that chart and I'll explain more of those levels once we get into it. Bitcoin had a rocket up. Look at it now, over $100,000 on the chart. Other altcoins are really surging too, particularly Ethereum is actually making a big move. And that's because of major upgrades in Ethereum that occurred yesterday. All right, so into the charts over here on the right, we see a lot of green. The health sector is in red. Consumer staples are also in red, but bigger stocks are really pushing and leading the way. One stock that I noticed that is down is Netflix, but you know what? Really, that kind of makes sense. Netflix has been on a tear. Over the last several weeks, Netflix just continues to go up. It doesn't matter what the news is. Even with the news coming out of 100% tariffs on movies filmed outside of the United States, Netflix just had a little blip in its chart. So right now, that kind of makes sense. All the money that was leaving these other big cap names were going into Netflix, and now that money's coming out of Netflix and going back into these other names. All right, so let's jump into the spiders. First off here, what do we see? I've got a new trend line right here. Yesterday, I had this trend line and this angle. I was anticipating a pullback much steeper to create a proper right shoulder of this potential inverse head and shoulders pattern. That did not happen. What that tells me, though, is that this move could exhaust itself sooner rather than later. So right now, that neckline still is valid right here, but let's see if we get a pullback in the coming weeks down to this support area, at least down to this gap fill right here, and then we could have a potential for a move back up and reattacking that line. Otherwise, if we continue up like this, notice the RSI on the SPY. It's not all the way at the top near the 70. However, it's towards the middle area or above the middle area, right in between the 50 and the 70. So we're right there near just it could go either way, so we'll see. But if we do continue to push up at this trajectory, we likely are going to reach a top right here at 583.06 that corresponds with the gap fill right over here. Now, if I flip into the 10-minute, just to kind of show you how sharp the buying pressure was, look at this move that we had. And then, wow, look at the dump out here at the end of the day. Still got 56 seconds left in the closing. But man, what a reversal in the last 3 10-minute candles on the SPY, almost negating all of this buying pressure that occurred earlier this morning. All right, so into the Qs. The Qs we notice here, they went up and kissed our first resistance right here at 493.46 with the spiders pulling back. That has pulled everything back down in the market. As you see here, we are forming what appears to be a doji there on the daily chart of the Qs. Should we continue moving up with any new tariff deals, this next resistance is going to be 5.11 on the charts of the Qs. Into the SMH. SMH did have another great push up. We did now confirm a move up above this trend line. So that makes this trend line support on the charts. So we can get rid of this resistance area. So if price comes over the next couple days, it would make sense for it to test this trend line and potentially get a bounce up to move higher. So you say, where are we going to go? And check this out. This is like magic again. I love charts and seeing how everything really pieces itself together. If I string together this pivot low, notice where this pivot low comes in contact with price coming back up right here. And so whenever I have action where I have a pivot low and then it's also a pivot high, That tells me this area is significant on the chart and will likely be resistance. That area is 232 and 24 cents. Into Bitcoin. Bitcoin, as I mentioned, had a monumental day. It broke out into the $100,000 range, going right through this resistance trend line right here. All the while, look down here at the bottom of the chart. RSI is overbought on Bitcoin, so it would make sense in the near term for some sort of pullback. That doesn't mean it needs to happen today or tomorrow. We could even push up into this 50% area of the parallel, which is going to be the next area of resistance on Bitcoin, just over 105,000. If we do that in the next day or two, I would anticipate a very nice pullback at minimum to retest this yellow trend line, and then likely coming down and retesting the bottom of this parallel channel. Into gold. Gold, as I've said, and we've highlighted on the S&P 500 and the rest of the indices, that the indices have been moving higher today. So risk onto the indices, risk off for gold. So gold is coming down as we see right here. And I anticipate gold to continue to come down. As long as new tariff deals come out, this support area around 3,100 should be tagged. And then eventually, if we have even more good news, this $2,800 level is still on the table. It's not out of the realm, but look at all of these support areas we're going to have to get through in gold for that price to be achieved. Something monumental, something very good economically will then pull price down in gold down here. Ultimately, I think this is a given that 3,100, we should tag that area in the near term for gold. Into silver. Silver's chopping around, much like I described yesterday. Any bulls out there on silver want to see price maintained right here in this area, basically a wedge pattern that's kind of developing here on the chart. We want to see consolidation for a breakthrough of this trend line. And if we do break through that trend line, we could go much higher on the chart, 36, 37, even $38 on silver. I'll have another level for you next week when we're able to evaluate this chart. Into US oil, that had a good pop today, but you notice too, this very similar to this down move up and rejection. So all in all, we're still down and consolidating sideways. We had a down day yesterday, now an up day today, almost negating what we did yesterday. So not too much new to report on oil, still support at 53.15 and resistance up here at the $63 level. Into nat gas kind of took a day off. You can see it's creating a doji candle. This resistance area at $3.73, still holding strong and holding price right here in this general range. Upward target $4.18, especially if we have a few more days of consolidation. The likelihood for this area to be tagged increases. So watch out for that in the next few trading days. Into Microsoft. Now, Microsoft had a great earnings announcements over here that you saw on Wednesday, April 30th. Beat on earnings, beat on revenue, stock reacted and catapulted higher. So right now we have gotten above this yellow trend line and are right near the top of the declining parallel channel. But if you look down here on the RSI, we are into resistance on Microsoft. So can Microsoft push higher? Sure, it definitely still could. And it could still just chop around in here. And this RSI will actually start to even out some. So both of those scenarios can be possible, but the highest probability scenario is that we need a slight pullback in Microsoft, at least to retest this trend line again. Even though we chopped above it right here, it's just overbought in the near term and likely will start coming back in. If we go back up, the top end of this parallel is right around $445. Into Tesla. Now, Tesla has been forming a bull flag right here on the charts. I was anticipating a little bit more of curling over price action coming down, testing either this declining trend line or this inclining trend line right here. It doesn't look like that's going to happen since this is so far down on the charts compared to other mega caps like Microsoft. This actually has a lot of room to run once it gets its proper footing. So starting with this bull flag, that's a great sign. As we'll jump into some other charts like Ethereum, I'll show you how those bull flags typically end up moving after consolidating in this manner. Into Apple. Apple was on watch yesterday because we did close beneath this trend line right here. You notice this parallel trend line from this trend line as well as this trend line. So this was on watch for potentially breaking down, especially off the back of news with Google and Apple yesterday that I covered. We did fall down perfectly right into that gap fill, bounced up, and now we're closing securely back within this parallel. So all this was a test candle. Doesn't really mean anything on the chart except for this bottom trend line is now weaker because it's been penetrated and tested several different times compared to the top. See the top, we've only touched this top end twice. So this top end is going to be much more strong and will also provide a very strong level of resistance if price does get back up into that range. But right now, it's still okay for Apple. It's not necessarily going to be ultimately collapsing in the near term, but it saved itself by closing back in the parallel today. Now into the Ethereum. Yesterday, Ethereum had a major upgrade. They upgraded on two accounts. It was one on the Prague upgrade and the other one on the Petra upgrade. Combined, it's called the Spectra upgrade. So this upgrade, what it does is it allows for a much faster, more efficient, and cheaper way for Ethereum to operate. So this attracted a lot of attention for investors as investors started piling into Ethereum. All the altcoins also got a big lift today, so we're going to check out some of those too. But let's jump into Ethereum right now. So Ethereum, as you see here, as I mentioned with Tesla, with the bull flag that was developing, this also had a nice bull flag developing for many, many days. You can see here over 10 days of consolidation and then a rip up higher. Now, the measured move on this bull flag actually was achieved today. So this right now is into resistance. And if you can see right here too, just like what we did on the SMH chart, if I connect this bottom pivot right here and string it all the way over, you can see that it connects to this pivot here. And then also price action has pierced through it today. So we're into resistance. We've already completed the measured move. So the likelihood of Ethereum pausing or hanging out for a little bit is higher than a continued move up. Now, you can notice also, too, down here on the RSI, we are actually above the 70 range. So near-term overbought on Ethereum, but it's back off of great news for Ethereum's efficiency and their network. Should Ethereum continue to rise, the very next resistance is going to be right here at $2,318. Into Polkadot. Polkadot also had a great move today, but notice, too, it broke out of this declining trend line. Price was consolidating on this trend line for the past week and a half. You can see here, made an attempt to get up there, never quite touched that trend line, but then started consolidating at a diagonally down manner, which is all still bull flag consolidation. And then today ripped up through this trend line. We'll watch in the coming days if Polkadot does confirm up here. If so, this trend line then becomes resistance. Next area, or pardon me, this trend line then becomes support. Next area of major resistance on Polkadot is all the way up here at 552. There will be some stops along the way, but this area will be major resistance on the chart of Polkadot. Into Cardano. Cardano has not quite broken out of its trend line, but you notice this has been contained more in a downward sloping parallel fashion. We've had a couple breaks of below and one or two breaks above. So right now we're consolidated, gaining strength for this big move that occurred today. Next stop is going to be this declining trend line at 75 cents. We'll see if that gets beaten and also confirmed in the coming trading days. Into XRP. XRP did not have as big a bounce as Polkadot, Cardano, or Ethereum. However, still, it's notable that it's pushing up here. We didn't have as clean bullish consolidation on this chart as what we did on Ethereum, but all the while, it's still pushing up. First area resistance is actually going to be right here, beating this pivot high at 235, but major resistance will be on this declining parallel channel right here at $2.48. All right, so a lot of info that was gone over here on the show. I hope you guys really enjoyed it. A lot of great stuff to look forward to as far as tariffs and volatility in the markets. They always present opportunities for us to capitalize on trades, which we love doing here at Verified Investing. My name again is Drew Dosek here. Thank you so much for watching Trading the Close. Look forward to seeing you guys next time. Until then, you guys take care.